This is Diamond D with where I'm giving you some love advice, some happiness advice, some everyday good advice to make your day a little more loving.
Hi, this is Diamond D with Love and Happiness, where I'm giving you a little bit of love advice, some happiness advice, some everyday good advice to make your day a little more loving. Our guest today is Miss Sharon Mosley. Miss Mosley is a licensed clinical mental health counselor who is currently the owner of the Fit Talk. She has over 20 years experience providing individual, family, and group therapy for those struggling with a variety of mental health issues. She also holds an ACE fitness and nutrition specialty certification. Sharon is committed to healthier living and believes one of the best ways to approach this is through walk and talk therapy. She encourages clients to move beyond the office setting and take their sessions outside for a walk when possible. She is a community activist, member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and a member with the Durham County Health Corporation Patient Safety and Clinical Quality Committee. I am pleased to welcome Ms. Mosley to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So tell me a little bit more about this fit therapy that you do.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the Fit Talk, hence the name, one of the things that I strive to do with that is to really just also expose clients to the fitness side of therapy. You know, I think oftentimes when we think about therapy, we think about being in an office, talking one-on-one with someone and having them sit with us and help us process whatever it is that concerns us. But with the walk and talk, what we do is also encourage folks to move. You know, one of the things that I found from personal experience and from some years of working with clients is that once they're able to move and get outdoors, that there just seems to be sometimes what I call a light bulb that just goes off. There's this moment of clarity. You know, sometimes we can feel really stuck in terms of our thoughts, but then we get outside and there's just something about being outdoors in nature that really just changes things. You know, and one of the things that we do know is that exercise releases endorphins. And so I offer that to anyone who's interested. It's certainly not everyone is interested. And so I don't do it with every client, but for those who are interested, I'm fortunate enough to have an office that really it backs against the tobacco trail. And so that's been a real plus and something that I really enjoy. And so what we do is we'll go out and we'll have our sessions. We move beyond the walls. And one of the things that they really enjoy about it is that when we're done, I'm able to say, can you take a guess about how far we moved? And sometimes we've gone 2 miles. And folks are really surprised by that. And then they know that that's something that they can do even beyond the sessions.
So I have to ask you this. How much weight has your clients lost doing this walk and fit therapy?
Well, we don't really focus on the weight and in terms of what they've lost. What we really do is focus on how they feel in their moods. And one of the things that they do is they report back and say, you know, when I came in, I was feeling sort of low and down, and I really just didn't have much motivation. And now I'm feeling pretty good. Now I feel as though I can go on with the rest of my week. And also I know that I can do this between the sessions on my own. And so then they'll come back and report that they've been moving, or then they'll also report that they've made some other changes in terms of their lifestyle and their nutrition. And so that's always a win.
Definitely. And then too, you think about all the old baggage and all the weight of, negativity that they may have been carried is being lost. So they might not have the pounds that are immediately reflective of the walk therapy, but they definitely got the release of old baggage. Now, has your therapy changed when you're doing, is it called telemedicine now, that when you're doing a lot of virtual consultation? How are you still incorporating sort of the fitness aspect of it when you're talking to your clients in this COVID-19 pandemic era?
That's a really good question. So one of the things that I do with just about everyone is I check in with them in terms of their movement, because we do know, being in this era where we are limited in terms of our activity and the things that we can partake in, I really check in with them to find out, what are you doing throughout the day? Are you taking breaks? Are you really incorporating some self-care? And so encourage them to get out in your neighborhoods if you don't feel comfortable going on the trails. And if you don't feel comfortable getting out in your neighborhoods, at least open the door and get some sunshine and let some sunlight shine through. And then just figure out some of the things that we can do indoors, and so there are some things, actually between YouTube videos and other just programs and apps that you have on your phone, there's a lot of movement that can actually take place indoors. And so still trying to keep folks engaged in that way.
So true. Oh, so true. I know a portion of your practice is devoted to dealing with people's anxiety. Let's talk a little bit about the signs of anxiety and how people may suffer from anxiety in different situations. Like, for example, some people have anxiety before they speak. Some people have anxiety before a major test. Test anxiety, I believe that's what they call it. What are the signs and triggers of anxiety, and how can a person who's experienced that kind of test anxiety or anxiety before speaking deal with it and get it to a manageable level?
Okay. So with anxiety, one of the things to know about that is that's something that at some point, I believe we all have experience with, whether it is going to be before we take a test, before we take a plane ride, before we have a big event. There's always some level of anxiety that I think just about everyone has experienced at some point. So there's a difference, though, between experiencing some anxiety and then having an anxiety disorder. So with the experiencing anxiety, some of the things that you just mentioned, those could be temporary things. We have some angst and some worry the night before a test, and then we take the test and we're fine. And then we, have another test, and we don't have any real anxiety about that because we feel a lot more confident about the work. But then there's the type of anxiety that stays with us a little longer, and it just doesn't seem to go away. And it isn't necessarily about one particular thing. We worry about the test. Then we worry about the first day at work. Then we worry about, leaving our house, and we worry about driving. And so it just really moves around and shifts from one worry to the next, and it just lingers. And it becomes more intense to the point that it starts to really impact and interrupt our activities, like our day-to-day work or our social life or relationships. And so then you can look at it in terms of there's different types of anxiety disorders, right? But one of the things also to note is that when it comes to anxiety, even anxiety disorder, is very common. That along with depression, those are two of the most common forms of mental health illnesses that one could have. So we start thinking about social anxieties, if I have to give a big speech, or if I have to do a presentation at work, or if I have to go out and eat alone or go to a movie, and I feel very uncomfortable with that because maybe I think people are staring at me, or I think that when I get to this event, if I don't take a friend with me, people are going to be talking about me, so much so that it will limit my social interactions with folks. And then there's the general, again, anxiety, where it's not about one particular thing, it can just be different things. And the phobias, then that's when we're looking more like, well, every time I take a test, it doesn't really matter the subject. It doesn't really matter how well prepared I am. I get this phobia about it, and it really just paralyzes me to the point that I've just decided I'm going to drop out of school, or I can't go any further. Or for those who have a fear of flying, that they decide not to fly. So there's many areas of anxiety, but sometimes they're just to the point where we need some more support.
Mm-hmm. So how do you think a person who is experiencing that should deal with it, like in the moment? And I hear what you say that, if it's test anxiety, it eventually goes away after the test. But what kind of maybe calming and soothing techniques can one, embark upon doing if they know all of a sudden, I know this test is coming up, I'm going to freak out on the test. What can I do to sort of calm myself so that when the test papers are distributed, or when now they have a lot of tests on the computers for the kids at school, when it's time to open up my laptop and take the test, I can control my anxiousness a little bit.
Right. And I think one of the first things is to be able to recognize the signs, like recognizing that, my palms are getting sweaty, recognizing that I'm getting irritable, that I'm feeling a little nauseous, or recognizing that I'm having some trouble concentrating, so all of those things can be signs. It doesn't mean that you'll experience all of the symptoms of anxiety at once, but you may start to notice some of these things like heart palpitations, and then you start to notice that there's a pattern to this. And so then that's when you really start to recognize that this may be a little more than, I'm just not feeling comfortable with this test. And so once you recognize that, then we could start to address, well, how are we going to deal with that? And so for some folks, being able to do things like meditation, being able to do something right before we take the test or the day before to start prepping, not just what we're studying, but to also start prepping in terms of incorporating some meditations, and maybe just making that a part of your routine care, doing maybe a relaxation technique, a breathing exercise, maybe doing a guided imagery sort of meditation, something that you can pretty much do anywhere, that you do not have to have a certain equipment or to be at a certain location, which I think is really good about that, because even if you're in the testing, let's say, location before everything was virtual, and you have a few moments to just sort of sit with your own thoughts, that can be very helpful. Then, of course, if you're able to meet with a therapist and be able to process and talk and get that type of support, that's always helpful. So those are things to consider. And then also considering, let's look at what is our activity. Sometimes we have to look at too the patterns and the things that we're feeling anxious about, and what is the activity leading up to that. Because sometimes there's a thing that will trigger that anxiety. And so then maybe we need to do something different. Maybe before we go to bed at night, we need to change up our sleep routine if we know that we have a big test in the morning. And so maybe we need to turn the TV off sooner, or we need to turn off all of our mobile devices. What are we eating before we go, and when are we exercising, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I know that you're a proponent of healthy eating. And do you think that there's some, caffeinated products or maybe high fructose products that can also trigger levels of anxiety or other mental disorders? Or what is your perception of the intertwine of nutrition with being mentally healthy?
I think that when it comes to foods and beverages that we have, I think we really do want to be mindful of what we are consuming, particularly before bedtime, because for example, something like caffeine, we know one of the things about it is it serves to give us a boost of energy. Now, if it serves to give us a boost of energy and we're preparing for bed, that's probably not the best time to have something like that, because what it does is it will add to our restlessness. And so even though we have physically shut down for the evening, but our brain hasn't, and we're still going and we're going. And so then when we get up at 6:30 in the morning to prepare for that 8 a.m. exam, we start to feel, some exhaustion, and we can't quite figure out why, because we're thinking we got into bed at a decent time, but we weren't really turned off, because we had that caffeine. So those are the kinds of things to think about. And it's not just the beverages, but it's also our food intake. Like, what are we having before we go to bed? When do we stop our last meal? Because I always say what you do the day before will impact your tomorrow. And so what I'm doing today will sort of have a determinant factor on what happens tomorrow in terms of what time I wake up, what I'm feeling like when I wake up, and my mood.
That is true. I know when I went to college, I had a fellow student who enjoyed drinking beer while he studied for his exams. And I always thought that was such a bad idea, because not only does beer at nighttime help you not to get a good night's sleep before your exam, but it was also an unhealthy habit for him. But it's good to know that even back then that, alcohol while you're studying or right before bed will not make your test go easier, but it can actually contribute to a high level of anxiety and restlessness during the night.
Yes, it definitely can.
So now that women are going through different life changes, such as having a baby or experiencing menopause, I'm hearing some rumblings that those two triggers can cause depression. Can you talk a little bit about the depression associated with after delivery, or the postpartum blues, or the baby blues as they call it, as well as any depression that's associated with menopause as it relates to women's health?
Right. So again, depression along with anxiety is a very common mental health diagnosis. And again, I think that most of us at some point have probably had some experience with feeling a little down and feeling what we would say a little depressed about something. But the difference between feeling a little depressed about something and having it as a diagnosis is that something may occur in our life. Certainly some things occur in your life that are out of your control, and you feel sadness about it, but it's temporary, and then you're able to sort of kind of pick up and move on. And then there's these other periods where things occur in your life, not due to any thing that you have done, but like menopause or premenopause, and having the delivery and birth of a child, that can cause an onset of depression as well. And a lot of it is attributed to, you know, the changes and hormonal changes that take place in a woman's body. And but it happens, and then during that time, there's you know, other things that are occurring that will impact your mood, and we know that that can be one of those things. So it's very real. You know, I think that there had been at least a few years ago when women would come in, and speaking of these experiences and these feelings, that sometimes it would be dismissed and discounted. And so they were expected to just sort of, you know, get over it, or just rejoice in the fact that you have a child, you know, or be glad that you no longer have to have a menstrual cycle anymore, you know. And so what is the complaint? But what we're learning, of course, through research, is that this is actually real. And then also learning by actually listening to patients and listening to clients, that this is a real thing. And so you address that, you know, again, by listening, and by listening to the client, and by the client also listening to their bodies, and being aware, and also recognizing, like, when things are changing, is there a pattern to this? And know that that's okay, that they don't have to be expected to do everything, and that there is no shame in it. Because that's the other thing too, I think, about the postpartum, is that there was some shame associated with it, but we don't have to be feel shameful about that either.
Right. As women, we need to be empowered. And if something is just not okay, we need to, you know, let the powers that be know, and get the necessary support groups and counseling, and talk to someone to help resolve our feelings, and help us process things. So absolutely. Well, we have a special section of Love and Happiness, which is Q&A with the experts. And so I have several viewers' questions that I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
So the first question is, and this is a relationship type question. It says, do you think it is okay to tell your significant other that they should stop being friends with people of the opposite sex now that you guys have a committed relationship? And what about telling them that they can't like or love any person of the opposite sex picture on Facebook or Instagram? What's your opinion about that?
Okay. I think for the person who is making this request, I think it's probably a good idea for them to consider why they feel the need to make that request. I think that folks have to look inward and first and decide, why do I feel like this is a request that I need to make? And if this is a request that I feel like I need to make, then why do I feel like that this is a good relationship? You know, because I also think that in relationships, things should be mutual. And particularly if one person is making the request and the other person isn't, so I think there's a bigger conversation that has to happen. But first, I think that person needs to look inward.
Good answer. The second question is also a question in relationship to marriage. It says, my husband does not want to go to counseling, and he knows my love language. He chooses not to love me in my love language, and I feel alone in the marriage. What should I do?
I think you try to talk to him again and explain why that is a concern for you, and why you're struggling with that. And again, explain what you need out of the marriage, because certainly, you know, we cannot make anyone do anything, and particularly if it's something that they don't want to do, but we can then express to them again what our needs are. And we can let them know what it is that we need in this relationship, and that we aren't getting that. And then hopefully that opens up a dialogue also for the other person in terms of what really it is that concerns them about going to counseling. You know, sometimes the things that concern us are the things that we heard, you know, or the things that someone told us we should be concerned about, or it could be, you know, from a past bad experience. So being able to to sort of get to the bottom of that in terms of investigate that as well.
Good ideas. The last question is, I know I have trust issues, but I want to be in a relationship. How do I begin? How do I know who to start to give my trust to?
So that comes up a lot, having some trust issues maybe from a previous relationship, and still having some of that hurt, and not feeling as though they can trust the next person because of that. And so I think that there's some healing that still needs to take place from probably it sounds like a previous relationship. First, to be able to heal yourself, and to understand what it is that you're still struggling with before you try to move on and bring another person into that, and make them responsible for a past relationship.
Good deal. So, Ms. Mosley, before we conclude, tell the viewers how they can get in contact with you.
Sure. So again, my name is Sharon Mosley. I am owner of the Fit Talk PLLC, and my office is located at 6208 Fayetteville Road, Suite 106 in Durham, North Carolina. But right now we're meeting virtually, and so I am here and available. You can reach me at Sharon@thefittalk.com or 919-695-7170. I am here and able to take your calls and hopefully meet your needs. And also, you can find me located at Psychology Today, and my profile again is under Sharon Mosley.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms. Mosley, for joining us today. I truly appreciate you. And to my viewers, let me leave you with this quote. It says, "No matter your education, your number of degrees, or your prestigious career, everyone's life is enriched through wise advice, mentoring, or counseling." Thank you so much for watching, and remember, God loves you. Take care.